Welcome back, my friends, to the Derate the Hate podcast. I am your host, Wilk Wilkinson, your blue-collar sage, calming outrage and helping to navigate a world divided by fog and those who would spread that fear, outrage, and grievance. Each week, I'm sharing stories from my path and using the power of conversation and collaboration with my many great guests. Together, we chart a course toward understanding, bridging divides, and fostering a community where wisdom prevails over discord. Friends, it really is about bettering the world one attitude at a time. We did not create the hate, but together we can derate the hate. The only good thing about a bad attitude is we have the ability as individuals to change it. For me, it starts with gratitude and personal accountability. I am so incredibly grateful that you have taken the time to join me for another powerful DTH episode. Please remember to subscribe and share the DTH podcast with your network of friends. If you would like to support the show, check out the Support Us page on the Derate the Hate website. With that, my friends, let's get to it. Joining me again today is my friend Zander Keig, someone of remarkable depth and impact. Zander wears many hats: award-winning social worker, speaker, educator, caregiver, and best-selling author. You may remember Zander from his first appearance on DTH back in September of 23, when we discussed how the trans community is often mistakenly believed to be a monolith. Zander is a thought leader with a profound ability to guide individuals and communities towards resolution and redemption. As a ProHuman Foundation Advisor and co-founder of the LGBTQ Caregiver Center, Zander has dedicated his life to bridging divides and fostering unity. In today's episode, we'll unpack concepts from Zander's book, The Third Space, a Nonconformist Guide to the Universe. What is the third space, and how does it help us transcend the rigid binaries that often define identity and community? Zander brings a unique perspective as a neurodivergent first-generation Mexican-American who has navigated life's challenges with resilience and grace. His story and insights are a lighthouse for those searching for ways to navigate conflict, isolation, and division. We'll discuss how creating inclusive spaces can foster greater understanding, why education is crucial in combating ignorance and hate, and how organizations like the ProHuman Foundation and Braver Angels are making a difference. Above all, we'll explore the redemptive potential of human connection, because no matter our past, the future holds possibilities for growth, community, and shared humanity. Friends, get ready for an inspiring journey into the third space with my friend, Zander Keig. Stay tuned. This is another enlightening conversation you won't want to miss. Here we go. Zander Keig, thank you so much for joining me here again on the Derate the Hate podcast. I am so glad to see you again, my friend. How are you?
I'm doing very well, and it's really good to be back. Thank you for having me back on.
So cool to see you. I know for the Derate the Hate listeners, obviously, Zander, you joined me for the first time on the Derate the Hate podcast back in, I think it was September of 2023, somewhere around episode 178, 179. We talked about a number of things. Obviously, we do a lot of work in the same spaces. We do a lot of different things together with the organization Braver Angels. One of the reasons that you're here to talk to me today is about our common place on the board of advisors for the ProHuman Foundation. So, Zander, there's a number of things I want to talk about today. So excited again to have you here with me again on the Derate the Hate podcast. But since we last spoke on the podcast, you've had a book come out, and the book is called The Third Space: A Nonconformist Guide to the Universe. For people who might not know, it may be lost on some people, but from your perspective, Zander, what is the third space? So that's where I want to start. What is the third space?
Good question. So, a lot of times people think of when we're talking about, seeing things through like a binary scope where people are good or bad, it's left or right, Republican, Democrat, Christian, Jewish, we're looking at things in pairs oftentimes. And so what'll happen is people will create their own spaces. And so people might be more familiar with things like the middle path, right? Buddhism is seen as the middle path. And the idea for the third space, for me, the reason I say I live in third spaces is because I'm not always seeking out the middle of things, right? I'm not always interested in going into the middle. Sometimes I completely jump outside and I'm creating an entirely new space for myself. And then I'm looking for others who might join me in that space. So, a good example of that would be, I talked in the previous episode about being trans. I'm a trans man. So what that means is I'm female sex, but I live in the world socially as a guy. And before I started my transition, I was a very androgynous looking woman, on the more masculine side. And so when I would go to workshops or events where they would split people up and they would say, we're going to bring all the women into this space and all the men into that space, and you're going to have your own conversations about things, and then we'll come back. And pretty often, I would find myself in those kinds of spaces pretty often just because of the work that I did or the communities that I was running in. And I would say, you know what, I'm going to stay right here in this room, and I want to create a third option. So if you want to stay with me, if you don't want to go with the men or go with the women because it doesn't feel like that's the right space for you, I'm going to be right here and you can join me. And most of the time, I didn't know that was going to happen, and I didn't get permission to do it. I just did it. Right. So it's also about carving out and being what I like to refer to a certain degree as being defiant, right? Defying those norms. And so that's what the third space means for me. It's like just carving out my own path, but I'm not a lone wolf. I do like to, have other people join me, and I like to look for other people that are carving out their own third spaces, right? And doing more heterodox work or depolarization work, which is how I ended up getting involved with the ProHuman Foundation and Braver Angels, right? So there are a lot of third spacers.
Oh, for sure, and that's one of the reasons that I've enjoyed so many of the conversations that you and I have had, Zander, is we're both very different, very unique human beings, but neither one of us falls into any one classification of any one thing. I mean, one of the big things that we talked about in our conversation back in September of last year was the fact that, like, the trans community is not a monolith, right?
That's right.
And while people like to coordinate these little boxes to put people in and say, well, this group does things like this and that group thinks like that, and we know we can count on these people to do things this way. This idea of that we are all these unique individuals. That's one of the things that I really, really love about the ProHuman Foundation is we are all these unique individuals that think and do things our own way, but we can all be brought together and thought of as equal by just recognizing our shared humanity. I mean, that is one of the most beautiful things about that. So with this book of yours, Zander, it's called A Third Space, A Nonconformist Guide to the Universe. You already talked a little bit about your idea of nonconformist and what being a nonconformist is. I want to get a little bit deeper into that. But what you were trying to do with this book is kind of shine a light out there for people. And there's this lighthouse on the front of the book that kind of stood out to me. And I think that's the point, right? Is obviously. So talk to me first about the lighthouse, and then what do you see it as being? This nonconformist in a universe that people try to define, but it's not so easy to define.
Well, the image of the lighthouse has always been something that I've liked. I grew up in Southern California, in a coastal town where we had a lighthouse. I served in the U.S. Coast Guard, and the lighthouse was one of our duty stations where we could go, we would go and do work. And so I just like the image of lighthouses. I visit lighthouses on a regular basis, right? And I just like this idea behind, right, the sort of the metaphor behind the lighthouse, which is it stands still, it shines its light, and it helps guide people. It also helps them to navigate, right, around more treacherous areas. And so for me, the idea was, it's not that I wrote a book to say, you need to do it how I did it, right? It's more like, here's what I did. Here's how I apply tools and strategies in my life to help me navigate the twists and turns or the ebbs and flows, right, of my life. And maybe some of what I've experienced and some of the tools and strategies that I've developed and have learned from other people will be of benefit to you, right, the reader. And so it's this idea of like, here's a light, right? The beacon is shining and it's just sending out a signal, because maybe there are people out there who still feel like they're alone in the world, that they don't realize that there are many, many people all around them in the world who are also having sort of second thoughts about things or new thoughts about things or wanting to start something new or join something new. And it's like, yeah, there's lots of us out here doing new things, right? And we can support each other in that process. And the bulk, the main message of the book is that when we step out on our own, there are consequences for that, right? It's like our brain tells us all the time, right? Stick with your people, stay together, don't wander off, right? That's our, our old brain that says, stay in a crowd or stay with people that you're, keep yourself safe. And so when you venture outside of, the prescripted viewpoint about things, you can all of a sudden find yourself on the chopping block of friendships and family relationships and marriages and all kinds of things, right? Losing your job. And so that all of a sudden it launches you out into a space, right? Like I've lost opportunities as a result of being more heterodox or nonconformist in the way that I present myself and the views that I have. And so if I didn't know that I could do what I know how to do to keep myself afloat through that, then it would be much more difficult. And so I just want to be able to say, hey, I'm here. There's lots of us out here. Just find your way to us.
Oh, for sure. And I know that's one of the things that you have done over your lifetime, Zander, is provided that guidance for people. I mean, I know you're a social worker and you provide guidance to people in so many ways that may feel lost in this world and don't know which way to turn or whatever. And I think that it's that kind of thing for people is so important, especially in the world today, when we have these different, well, whatever you want to call them, powers that be that say, okay, well, just because you think this way, we've got to put you on this path, or because you think this way or look this way or sound this way, or maybe because you're a same-sex attracted female or a same-sex attracted male, that we've got to put you in this group, and then you're going to follow this path because that's the path that we say, and because this many people in this study did things this way, we know that this is the right thing for you to do. And now people get all muddled up and confused in their own brain because they're like, well, that's not really, I mean, I kind of fit there, but I don't really fit there. And that's probably not where I want to go, but I'm probably going to go there. That is where things get so ugly for me. Mm-hmm. And that's where I get so frustrated, Zander, is I like the idea of the unique individual. I really do. I mean, I do not like these identitarian policies. I don't like that identitarian persuasion and the idea that, I've got friends that are same-sex attracted, but they often feel bullied by the people that they want to be part of, but because they don't follow that or don't toe the line for what they're, I guess, told they're supposed to think,
Yeah.
they end up getting bullied within their own community. I think that's some, in fact, I know that's some of what you and I have talked about before. So let's kind of revisit that a little bit, because I think it ties in very closely with, with what you're with what you're doing with this book, what you do with the organization Braver Angels, what you do with the ProHuman Foundation. So talk a little bit about that for me, please.
Yeah, I mean, the people that have been the most critical of me and have made the attempts to impact me as far as, maybe I'm an independent contractor. So, contracts that I have or my opportunities to speak at events, they've all been from, quote, the trans community, right? Mm-hmm. Those have been the louder voices and the more, I won't call them successful, but they have made efforts, and from time to time, those efforts have worked, but not very often, right? I count on one hand and it's only a couple fingers. So I'm doing all right. They're not derailing me at all. But it was through the work that I was doing and the response that I was getting that led to me meeting with Brian Bartning, one of the founders of the ProHuman Foundation. I met him, back in 2021 when he had founded another organization called FAIR, Foundation Against Intolerance and Racism. I also met Letitia and Daryl Davis, who are also all the co-founders of the ProHuman Foundation. So I was invited to be on the advisory board initially, and then start working in FAIR on their FAIR diversity program, doing corporate trainings, because I had just not only the background in that work, but also coming from being a person who, as we used to say, had been canceled, right? Or people were attempting to cancel me. And it was around a lot of the DEI stuff at the time, right? Back in 2021, 2022. So that's how I was introduced to, the idea of the pro-human philosophy, right? It's like, as Daryl Davis likes to say, he's not anti-racist, he's anti-racism, right? Because he's not anti-people or a person. As a matter of fact, if anybody knows Daryl Davis, then you know this to be true, that he befriends members of the KKK and neo-Nazi groups, and has single-handedly, worked with individuals who have completely left white supremacist organizations because of their friendship they developed with him. And so that's truly remarkable. So, the idea of being anti-racist is to be against people. And if you're against people, then there's no hope for them. You don't hold any hope for them, right? You don't extend any grace to them, and you just write them off. And that's a missed opportunity, right? Daryl will say it's a missed opportunity for conflict resolution. It's also just a missed opportunity to grow and expand and, make new friends. And so he's been able to do that. And I really like that journey that he's been on and that model that he's created. When I was a fair diversity workshop facilitator, Daryl was one of the primary designers of the training that I was facilitating. So I had the opportunity to also work with him directly, and continue to now at the ProHuman Foundation. And he just recently started up the ProHuman Foundation Ambassador Program. And I'm one of the instructors in that program. So I'm really, we just got started, last week. And so, we're getting, just getting going, but I'm really looking forward to the next year of being, involved with our initial cohort, our pilot cohort that just started. And Daryl led us off,
for sure.
Yeah, with that training. So it's been wonderful to be able to be with people who are like, listen, there's a different way to talk about, things that we experience in our society, right? The discrimination that may be coming up, the prejudice, the bias, but we have to also acknowledge that bias is a human component. We all have bias. And it can be positive bias as well. It's not only negative bias. And so we have the ability to recognize that we have bias, and the negative biases that we have, once we're aware of them, then we can work, right, to minimize them. We have the ability to do that. Right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And you know, one of the things that you said there, Zander, that I really want to kind of hone in on is that concept of hate the ism, not the ist. And that's, you know, Daryl's been on my program here a number of times. Him and I've had a number of conversations. In fact, I recently ran some clips of our first conversation way back in episode 99 of the D-Rate the Hate podcast, talking about, you know, how can you hate me when you don't even know me, which is kind of one of his key storylines, and we were able to talk about you know, many of the experiences that he has had, and with him, it's so perfect with him being one of the founding members of the ProHuman Foundation. You know, he is able to, you know, exemplify that pro-humanity stance so well. And then that hate the ism, not the ist, and it's not even hate the ism, but like he will talk about, and he talks about so often, is we hate that which we don't understand. Mm-hmm. I think he understands the ism and the ist better than anybody, and that gives him this kind of almost superpower, this superhuman ability to go in and interact with these folks that would otherwise consider him almost subhuman. And he's done it so many times. He's done it so well, and he's walked so many different people out of these different extremist movements. Mm-hmm. One primary example we've talked about, I had them both on my podcast, is Jeff Scoop and Daryl Davis joined me in a joint conversation on the D-Rate the Hate podcast, talking about their first meeting, and then now these guys are like brothers, right? Yeah. And but you know, Jeff Scoop was I mean, the head of the National Socialist movement for a couple decades, right? And he was an American neo-Nazi, and Daryl Davis was instrumental in and was the catalyst for bringing him out of that movement. That's the kind of things that we're seeing in these organizations. Like, I mean, I know Daryl's a friend of, you know, still a friend of FAIR. He's one of the co-founders of the ProHuman Foundation. These conflict resolution things that we do, they provide so much more fruit, Zander, than the typical, you know, we're going to beat you into submission because we don't like what you say, or we are going to shame you or cancel you into submission because you don't walk the line that we want you to walk.
Yeah.
These things that we do now with the organizations that we run in, Zander, Braver Angels, the ProHuman Foundation, the idea that we can come together on contentious issues and talk about them in a non-contentious way, almost finding that third space. We don't fall into one classification. We don't fall into the other. But we can find a better way to engage, and it's often found in that third space.
Yeah, you know, what I try to do is I try to put it in as simplest or easiest to understand terms, because, you know, in addition to being a social worker who is trained in cognitive behavioral therapy, I also have a master's in conflict analysis and resolution, right? So it's not just that I've had, you know, challenging life experiences and I've learned how to, you know, muscle through them. I've also been trained, right? I've been trained in these ways. And my father introduced me to meditation when I was 12 years old. And so I think that's also, you know, part of the foundation of how I've been able to go through the different challenges I've experienced in life and come out on the other end. And it's not just that I white knuckled it through. I mean, I'm quite fortunate that I've gained skills, very practical skills. But I'm not going to go out into the world. It doesn't fit me to go out into the world and be, you know, a professor or even to be a psychotherapist. Like I didn't enjoy doing psychotherapy. I'm much would much rather be working with people, teaching them basic skills, right? Basic cognitive behavioral skills, basic conflict resolution skills. And so that's what I do now. Like that's my job, so to speak. I work part-time now in my semi-retirement, but I want to be able to make those things accessible to the masses. And I think that's what Daryl does, right? He's talking about conflict resolution. He's demonstrating it through his actions. But he's not making it seem like it's so far out of reach for everybody else to be able to do that. Now, it sounds, I think when people hear his story initially and they're like, you did what? You sat down next to the Grand Wizard of the KKK? It's sort of like, what are you, crazy? Like how dangerous that is. And I mean, yes, but Daryl's a big guy, so I think he'll be okay for the most part,
sure.
And has been,
yeah, right.
But that doesn't mean that everybody's going to receive that well. There are probably people, I know there are people, but I'm not, I don't know how many people who, within say Black community, so to speak, that's not a monolith either, but who they don't like maybe what Daryl does. Right?
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
So he, in some ways, he's also going against what's expected of him, because he's, a Black man with a voice and he's, he's got the mission. And why are you wasting your time with those white supremacists? And it's like, well, because it turns out that's a really good way to reduce racism, because it's not those like 200 to 300 individuals that he's interacted with. It's all the people that those people interacted with. I believe there's a number of chapters of the KKK that have just completely folded.
They've completely folded. They've vanished.
That's huge
as a result of the work, because it's like a domino effect, right? Yeah. And that's that is absolutely one of the things that I love about the ProHuman Foundation and the kind of the different path that they've taken from other organizations that these same people have been instrumental in starting. Is the ProHuman Foundation is focusing on education, right? One of the big things that Daryl and I have talked about in the past is the fact that a lot of hate stems from ignorance. And then if you combine the idea of education with the idea that no person is in some way beyond redemption, right? That's one of the things that I've talked with Jeff Scoop is redemption for radicals. Don't write off the ist just because that they may have an ideology based on a profound amount of ignorance to who these other people are, or they've never been exposed to the idea that this person is another human being that has the same wants, desires, needs that we do, as human beings. That's our common humanity, right? And yes. So once we begin to show these other human beings, don't write them off as some kind of monster, but educate them to the ways of how we all have common wants, needs, desires, it begins to change the dynamic of the conversation. That's one of the things about ProHuman Foundation, working with different organizations, getting into the K-12 school system and being able to educate and enlighten people. Education and enlightenment is the way past much of the isms that we face in society today. Because, let's just put it this way, Zander, you and I can both look at this thing from very different perspectives. Obviously, we've got very different lived experiences, but we can both look at this, what we've seen from our own lived experience, and say, it really hasn't worked out very well for anybody to try and beat people into submission, cancel people into submission, shame people into submission. None of these things have worked. From the beginning of the time, they do not work. You may destroy somebody else's life. Effect. Well, yeah. Yeah, you absolutely have the opposite effect. Go ahead with that. That's... you just create more of what you claim to be fighting against, in my opinion. Yeah. That's been my life experience.
It's like, I know what it feels like to be written off, right? Because I was a little hoodlum when I was a kid. I was in special education, right? And so people just wrote me off as, a mental defect, There were people who wrote me off because I was, I was lesbian and now was a trans guy. And now I get, sort of written off by a certain segment of the people because I'm in the more pro-human or heterodox space, depolarization space. And so, but because of how I am, because I don't take that rejection or that criticism, I don't take it inside. I don't internalize it. I just sort of step back and I look at it and I go, well, that's interesting. They're writing me off. And then I just keep doing what I'm doing. But some people can be really impacted by feeling rejected and dejected by others. And so that's another thing, with my book I'm trying to impart is like you have the ability to learn how to navigate through those more treacherous waters so that you can find your own, third space. So you can find, where you can join with other people because it gets, nobody wants to be isolated. We have an epidemic of loneliness in our society, and that leads to a lot of, mental health issues and physical health issues. And, it's like being on this, with the social work background, you see what isolation does to people. I think it's like the World Health Organization says that, isolation is just as impactful on your health as smoking cigarettes. It's like it can be really detrimental to your physical and your mental health. So it's been a real honor to be able to be, one to have been connected with like Bayan reached out to me within like a month of FAIR being, started and said, we'd like to have you on board. And so, that was right at the beginning where I wasn't sure where I was going to land. And immediately I just, I said, absolutely, I'm on board. And then I found, Braver Angels even before that, but I didn't start getting involved until around 2021, 2022. And then, meeting Daryl Davis was just a real blessing. And, we've been able to develop a friendship in addition to our working relationship, so much so that he wrote the foreword for my book. So, true honor, that he took time out of, I know he travels all around the world. He's a very high in demand guy. So, he took the time. Not only did he take the time to write it, but he also took the time to record an audio version of it because I'm working on the audio book now. So he's a really, really just good person through and through.
Genuinely beautiful human being. Yeah. I've heard him described in many different ways. I've heard him described as a superhero and a real life superhero. And between Daryl and Bayan and Letitia and then Lori and the rest of the staff at the ProHuman Foundation. This has been incredible being part of that. I normally in this series, talking about the ProHuman Foundation Board of Advisors, I kind of say, okay, what is it that you want to do? But you and I have been kind of, talking about what it is we do with the ProHuman Foundation from the beginning of this conversation. Yeah. It's been an incredible conversation, Zander. I'm sure it could go on and on, but we're right here at the end of our time. So we're obviously members of the Board of Advisors for the ProHuman Foundation. That's a great honor. Tell the DTH listeners where they can find out more about you personally, Zander. I know you've got a website. Obviously, the book they can find on Amazon and wherever finer books are sold. The Third Space, A Nonconformist Guide to the Universe. Tell us about your website, and then we'll wrap this one up and look forward to the next one.
Absolutely. Thank you. So it's zanderkeig.net. So Zander and Keig is KEIG.net. And there's also a link to my podcast on there, The Umbrella Hour, so people can check that out. And the other books. I've edited anthologies and contributed to other books, so I have those on my website as well. And then ProHumanFoundation.org for people who want to learn more about what we're up to.
Very cool. Well, Zander Keig, it's been a great pleasure. I will certainly look forward to the next time. Thank you so much, my friend, And we'll see you again.
Yep, it was wonderful speaking with you again, Wilk. Have a good night.
Friends, if there's anything in this episode that provided exceptional value to you, please make sure to hit that share button. Share it with your friends, share it far and wide. And of course, if you haven't done so already, be sure to subscribe right from our website so you can get the Derate the Hate podcast sent to your email inbox every week. So this is Wilk wrapping up for the week saying get out there, be kind to one another, be grateful for everything that you've got, and remember it's up to you to make each and every day the day that you want it to be. If there is something that you would like to share with me, you can catch me on most social media platforms, or you can email me directly, wilk@wilksworld.com. With that, my friends, I am going to back on out of here, and we will catch you next week. Take care.